Welcome into this week's edition of AWA Unleashed. We are the preeminent place for AWA podcasting and video stream here on what they call the interwebs, the World Wide Web, the internet, however you want to say it. My name is Chris Tubbs. I am one part of it, and today it's a fun show. It's something that made the AWA famous. It's something that it's known for, and I'm going to bring in two guys right now. Here it is. You see one guy, you see two guys. Get rid of one guy. Well, I can't stream. But guys, it's tag teams. And if there's one thing that people remember about the AWA, it is the gluttony of the embarrassment of riches that the AWA had when it came to tag teams. So I'm excited to talk about that. But before we do, want to get the all of our thank yous and kudos to everybody that's been continuing to support us. If you have been supporting us, thank you so much. If you haven't, I don't know what your problem is. That's where you can catch us right there. YouTube, people love us on YouTube. They love to see our faces. I have no idea why. I think it's more about the pictures. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, Google, Amazon, everything right there. I've been talking for 90 seconds. I'll let you guys talk a little bit, and then we'll do some more plugging. But, guys, we continue. I love the fact that we've got merch rolling out. We got shows rolling out. People still love it. And, I think I don't even think we've hit our stride yet. And I'm really super excited about it, guys. Who wants to go ahead and go, Mick?
I couldn't agree with you more. The response continues to be tremendous. I appreciate it, and I know I get a lot of private messages on Facebook and a lot of emails, people coming up with their ideas. We'd like to see more of this. How about you bring this person on the air, and so on and so forth. In any case, it's so gratifying. By all means, keep up that two-way conversation between you and us, and we're having a good time. Hope you are too.
Absolutely. I echo everything Mick said. It's so refreshing when we have a show that drops on Tuesday, and it seems like within minutes we're getting compliments and kudos about another great show, our best show yet. And this is encouraging for us. And those that have sent us constructive criticism in polite ways, we so appreciate you, because we're here. Seriously, we're here to make this your show and stuff that you want to see and hear, and we're going to continue to do the best that we can. So thank you, everyone, for following Unleashed.
Yeah, and to kind of back that up, I've gotten ideas. You guys have given me feedback. I've gotten ideas from listeners and viewers. So believe me, we are doing what we can to try and make this thing better, because it's a work in progress. When we say this thing is like unscripted, it literally is. We've got bullet points, but I don't have any idea where it's going. You guys don't have any idea where it's going. We kind of have a skeleton, an idea, but we just kind of roll with it. So sometimes things may take a left turn or a right turn, but yes, by all means, we definitely want the feedback. So thank you guys, because this is about you guys as well. Do you want to thank Soda Stick? You can see right there, they've got the skull hat. Thank you, Georgie. Mick's got his Met Center hat. They're also, because of them, we've got the AWA Unleashed t-shirts. We had it available for a very limited time, but we do have something else that's very, very special coming down the line, guys, and it's courtesy of Soda Stick. So be looking for that. If you're looking for anything that's Minnesota sports related, whether it's Twins, Vikings, Timberwolves, Wild, Gophers, whatever, check them out, sodastickco.com. Use the promo code UNLEASHED. Get 15% off. So we got that. Also want to thank our friends at Lift Bridge Brewery. As you can tell, I'm drinking, if I can even see it right there. It's my Lift Bridge, my IPA this morning. And I'm going to be careful so I don't spill it like I did with the barber interview, because that was beer abuse. But check them out, liftbridgebrewery.com. They've got swag. I've got the t-shirt right here. It's super comfy. So we're going to be out there, actually, guys, and lasting just in a couple of weeks. We're going to be down there, our very first live show. It's about you guys now. It's going to be a Q&A. It's going to be some games. We're going to give things away. We're just going to have a good old time. Doors open at noon. show at 2, and the Stars of Midwest All-Star Wrestling are going to take center stage at 3:30. So we got a lot of things going on. You can get your tickets right there. Just go ahead and copy that link, put it in your browser, and come and see us. So I think we got everything out of the way. You agree, guys?
Good
Let's
to go.
make it happen.
All right, let's do it. Today, tag teams. Guys, this is what the AWA was known for. I mean, I don't know if there was a territory that had more high-profile tag teams. And I know, George, you wanted to kind of kick this thing off by, letting everybody know that, there's a certain lineage that goes along with tag teams in the AWA in the Minneapolis territory.
Well, the thing is, a lot of people, and some that don't, but the NWA territory in the 50s, which was Minneapolis, later became the AWA territory in the 60s. But back in 1954, on December 28th, Hard-Boiled Haggerty and Hans Herman were defeated by Verne Gagne and Pat O'Connor in the very first Minneapolis tag team match. And from there on out, in the 50s, through the 60s, the 70s, and into the 80s, AWA, NWA, tag team wrestling was on top in the AWA Minneapolis territory. So I thought that was a little bit of history we'd want to share. And that the lineage of what the tag team was. 2 guys coming together to hold a tag rope, only one in the ring at a time. And we know that concept, those rules were made to be broken and to cause all-out pandemonium, as Dusty Rhodes would say, and made the tag team match and the stories told in them so special. And that's what we're going to highlight today, some of the teams that did that for us.
Before we get to that, I do have some questions for you guys when it comes to tag teams, because I know you each have a list of 10, and we could go on for a lot longer than what we're going to. George, you mentioned that these were 2 guys that came together. In terms of Verne and how he looked at tag teams, was it always 2 guys that came together as a unit, or was it like 2 guys that maybe he felt were compatible, that maybe these 2 guys would be a good presentation? Go ahead and start with that, George.
The unique thing about the tag team concept is that a lot of times it was 2 guys that had similar styles. The fans would get over with a babyface team or a heel team. But a lot of times it was 2 guys who had different styles. And you could look at them and say, well, how can he be with him? They don't match. But as a team, they gelled with their opposite styles. Billy Robinson and the Crusher, for example, 2 different ring styles, but they meshed and were popular. And then you get the concept of the tag teams where can they come together and work together because they don't like each other, at least on screen and in the storyline. And the fans have that question mark. How are they going to work together? And then you had the concept of 2 good tag team, longtime buddies, pals, and they break up. One turns on the other. I mean, the storylines in tag teams, they were just phenomenal and so interesting. And the soap opera could be continued because of these many questions that could be asked or done within a match.
Mick, I want to ask you, did you ever get the sense that guys wanted to be in tag teams, or do you feel like they would rather be solo? Because, I mean, I feel like, we hear that, when you're in a tag team, maybe you don't get the shine that you want. Some guys kind of want to go out on their own. With the way that things were presented in the AWA, I mean, do you feel like maybe guys, they were okay with being in tag teams because they were featured so prominently?
I think so. And I think the AWA handled tag teams brilliantly. That's the one thing that I would say. And in that sense, nobody had to be jealous. Nobody had to be concerned that they were going to be losing their shine. Everybody was making money. Wally Carbo and Verne Gagne knew exactly what they were doing, who they were putting together, no matter how they came together, whether it was as a result of some, fracas and some guy turning on another guy or whatever the case may be, it always seemed to work. The AWA tag team concept and the NWA, the same thing, I would have to say. So in terms of, did the guys feel that they were being overshadowed by a partner or whatever? No. And again, Chris, we've talked about this many times. Bottom line is money. And the AWA tag team feuds over the years drew an awful lot of money.
I want to ask both you guys this. Were there any teams that you felt or guys that would have been good together that, I mean, whether it was like a backstage relationship or you just felt like their chemistry would have worked, but they were never put together and presented as a tag team? Go ahead and start with that, George.
When you ask that question, Chris, one team that comes to mind for me would be Verne and Jeff Ports. For whatever reason, I always loved tag teams that kind of looked alike or had the same ring style or had the same outfits together. I mean, call me crazy, but I kind of liked that. And it brought some unity to the whole thing. And I thought Gagne and Ports would have been a very exciting team, especially against guys like Nick and Ray and some of the teams that were around in that time. So that'd be my answer, Verne and Ports.
I would say, and I've mentioned this before, but you'd have to do a little chicanery, little angle, little storyline. Nick Bockwinkel and Jim Brunzell. I always, they teamed up in Japan, and I always envisioned Brunzy somehow turning on Greg, maybe managed by Bobby Heenan. I thought that would have been an absolutely stellar tag team. My dream team, seriously, Bockwinkel and Brunzell. I think it would have been great.
What about any teams that you felt were, and I'll ask you, teams that you thought when you saw them, or whether it's in the ring or their personalities, you're like, oh my God, this is not going to work, and they ended up being good, and then vice versa. I want to ask you guys both: was there one team that you thought was going to be good together that just never, for whatever reason, never got over? Why don't you go ahead and start with this one, Mick?
As far as the teams that I thought would be good, this is going to be kind of a controversial answer. And this is going back to the 1970s AWA. It wasn't necessarily a team that was makeshift and thrown together in the AWA. It was a team that had a reputation already when they came into the AWA, and that was the Valiant brothers. And for whatever reason, I like Jimmy Valiant. I like Johnny Valiant. Mm-hmm. For some reason, that team just didn't do it for me in the AWA. And I don't know why it was. They had much more success, as far as I'm concerned, other places. So you never know how things are going to turn out. That was a case where, the hype, to me at least, when they came into the AWA territory, just did not match what I saw from them in the ring.
What about you, George?
Well, the one that comes to mind to me, and it has always been this way, and I don't understand why, is Jesse and Adrian. You talk about two completely different ring styles. In the AWA, they were magic. So that'd be my answer.
Another question I want to ask you guys is, I know that we love the behind the scenes dirt, and if guys aren't getting along, any stories of guys that had the team but absolutely despised each other, but yet because they worked in front of a crowd so well that they ended up being a team, but they could not wait to get out of each other's presence? I saw you kind of shaking your head there, George. Why don't you go ahead and hit this one up first?
Well, this one that comes to mind wasn't necessarily an AWA tag team, but Red Bastien himself told me this story while visiting here. He and his brother, Lou Klein, who was Lou Bastien with Red, they absolutely, Red told me, he said, working with Lou was like being dragged behind a pickup. He said, I hated working with him. But anybody that looks at their tag team together, the Bastien brothers, Red and Lou, in 1959 through about 61, they were tag team magic. They made all the magazines. They made several territories. They made money. And Red told me, he said, I would go in, I'd get in the ring, we'd do our magic, I'd go home, we never talked to each other. And then their team broke up and went their separate ways. Both were tremendous stars. Lou was, I think Red was the bigger of the two in starship, but Red didn't like working with him at all. And he was his brother in the ring. But they never showed it. When you watch them wrestle, and I've seen some tapes, when you watch them wrestle, man, are they cohesive? Are they magic? Do you want to come back and see them tomorrow? So that would be my answer on that one.
To me, I never heard of any AWA teams that really did not get along, really disliked each other to the extent where it would spill out or you'd hear about locker room scuttlebutt or whatever. You know, a lot of guys.
Oh, that's a good word, scuttlebutt.
Great. Huh?
Yeah, I like it.
Right up there with preeminent. But anyway, you don't hear about it in the AWA. And again, I think that goes to the professionalism of the way that Verne and Wally ran the ship. Mm-hmm. You had guys that were put together that really, from a personality standpoint, outside the ring, were totally divergent. And the team that comes to mind is Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens. In the ring, they were magic, two completely different lifestyles. And you would think these guys would be butting heads because Ray was a party guy. Ray was, the motorcycles and the speedboats and everything else. And Nick was the straight-laced guy, a homebody with Darlene and what have you. But in terms of guys that really didn't get along, I didn't hear that too much in the AWA.
Okay. It just, we all want the behind-the-scenes dirt. And I figured if there was some sort of chicanery that was going on, since we're going to be throwing around, these 25-cent words, I figured I'd try and
chicanery.
The magic too, Chris, is you hit on it, and Mick touched on it. If they can make money together, it's all about the house and the gate and getting the fans to come back. And if they can make money together, most of the guys were professional enough, and I used the Red and Lou Bastine. They were professional enough to know that I got to go in there, I'll do my job, and I'll go home, and I don't have to put up with this guy anymore.
Chris,
that's the way it works. It's kind of like Karch and I. God help me if I have to spend any time personally with him. Whoops, I didn't. You're not going to have that on the air, are you?
No, I can edit that out.
No, I leave it in there. It's the truth.
Oh, how I detest him. What I was going to say, Chris, is that it's like any other job. You go to work, and there's some people you like, some people you don't like.
Right.
But you've got your duties. You've got your duties as assigned. Mm-hmm. You've all got the same objective. And in the end, whether it's you're making money for the tag team or making money for the company, you got to get along. Yeah. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
All right.
One more time, Mick.
No, don't do that.
I feel like the rest of the show, I'm just going to take myself out of the scream, and I'll just let you guys do it. I feel like two stitches. Okay. So I've got a couple more things that I want to add at the end, and I know that we're going to pay tribute to someone a little bit later on in the show, Mick. But let's get to the tag teams. And here's what I love about this with you guys is because of the time frame of the AWA. You guys are coming at it from two very distinctly different angles, two different time frames. And I love that because it's something that I think everybody can relate to, whether, you're a fan of the early days or, maybe you didn't really get a chance to catch the heydays like I didn't get a chance to. But here, these lists I think are really good because you guys, I think you do a great job of covering it. So, George, let's go ahead and start with your number one here.
I'm going to start with Pretty Boy Larry Hennig and Handsome Harley Race. When you think of tag team wrestling in the 60s, I honestly believe there is no team that can take more credit for the success of tag teams in that era for at least 5 or 6 years of the decade. They came together in a weird way. They were both down in Amarillo, Texas, not wrestling together. Harley was relatively new to the business for just a few years. And they met. Larry came home here much rougher than he had left. And it was acknowledged that he is now a roughneck rather than, a clean-cut wrestler. And Larry went to Wally Carbo, and he suggested that he get to work with this young kid, Harley Race. And they got together. And if you saw Hennig and Race, they were just phenomenal in the ring. Their styles were a little different. Race was more the bump taker. Larry, as he said, was excess baggage or surface transportation, as he called it. But together, the magic on their interviews, their camaraderie. And now we were talking a moment ago about guys that get along. Larry and Harley remained close and best friends till the day both passed away. And Larry actually got teary-eyed when he was talking about Harley a couple of years back. Harley was going through some health issues, and Larry said, I've never had a crossword with Harley, and they loved working together. The only thing that changed for them was that Harley was going to move on and had some aspirations as a singles wrestler and had an opportunity to buy into the Central States territory, and it moved on. We know his career went well, and so did Larry's. But in the 60s, from 64 to 68, phenomenal, even a few matches in 69. And then they re-teamed together down in Florida very briefly and in Japan in the early 80s. That's my team as one of the best for tag team wrestling.
All right, what do you got for the first one that you want to talk about, Mick?
Surprisingly, Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens. And to me, that is not only my favorite tag team of all time, but I think I look at them as the best tag team in the history of the AWA. And the thing with Nick and Ray, they had known each other, from times in California and what have you. When Verne Gagne and Wally Carbo put Nick and Ray together, it was a stroke of genius. And here's what I would say about Nick and Ray. Besides the fact that they were both phenomenal wrestlers as singles wrestlers, and they managed to gel so tremendously as a tag team. You add Bobby Heenan to the mix, of course, eventually. And you just got pure magic. The thing that I would say about Nick and Ray is they were in an era that I would say is arguably the most heated as far as fan involvement and believing what they were seeing in wrestling, the early 1970s. You would hear about the shootings in Chicago, or riots here or riots there. And Bockwinkel and Stevens were a heat machine. And when you added Bobby Heenan to that, I just think the whole thing, and of course their opponents back in the day, you had a whole list of the Wahoo McDaniels and Billy Robinsons and Crutchers and Red Bastille. So their opposition was stellar, was grade A. The timing was just right, and I think that Nick and Ray are just legendary.
All right, what do you got for your number two here, George?
I want to just say that the thing about a great tag team is that in-ring workmanship and the ability to work together. And we've all heard the saying, there's no I in team. So when they come together and make it happen, Nick and Ray, Larry and Harley, you saw the result. My next team is one that, for people that know me personally, won't be a surprise. It's luscious Larry Heinemi and beautiful Buddy Wolf. I want to tell you guys, here is a tag team. Now, I said I like teams that look alike, dressed alike, that sort of thing, had similar styles. I don't think you could come up with two guys that ever teamed in the AWA that had more of that connection. They looked a lot alike. In this picture, Larry's got darker hair, but they looked a lot alike. They were built similar. They wore the same type of ring attire, and their styles were almost like you saw one, you saw the other, vice versa. And they were a team that, as far as I'm concerned, like a lot of people, they should have been champions. But in the scheme of things, there were so many outstanding teams at the time that Larry and Buddy were together that it wasn't in the picture for them to be champs. But they were outstanding in the middle of the card and in the main events they had together with other teams that, in my opinion, they have to rank in about the top 5 or 6 all-time great AWA tag teams.
All right, what do you got for your next one here, Mick?
Number two is a team that George alluded to a little bit earlier on, and that's Jesse Ventura and Adrian Adonis. And we don't have to speculate who was the worker of the two of them. As far as in-ring ability, Adrian Adonis, long before he, ballooned to almost 400 pounds. There's a great cover of Pro Wrestling Illustrated with Jesse and Adrian. Got to remember the time that they were here and the feuds that they had with the High Flyers, for example. They're here at a time where Hulk Hogan is here. And I would say, if you take Hulk Hogan out of the equation, Adonis and Ventura and the High Flyers and what have you really were at the top of the rung in the AWA. The feud was red hot. The timing, again, putting them together was pure genius. Adrian took hellacious bumps in the ring. He was a psychologist, and Jesse was the guy, that would piss people off behind the microphone. Jesse was a genius, in cutting his promos with Mean Gene Okerlund. Again, magical tag team combination.
What do you got for your number 3 here, George?
I'm going with a babyface team this time, and I'm going with the Redheads, Billy Red Lions, and Red Bastien. And you want to talk about the genius of putting two guys together. In a lot of ways, their team was very similar to the Red and Lou Bastien tag team of almost a decade earlier outside of the AWA. But here's where a great tag team comes into play. And again, I think this is a team that could have been good representatives as AWA champions. But again, the timing and other teams around them and the ability for the team to draw made it better that they were challengers. Here's where they're great. Dick Beyer and Red Bastien both told me that their favorite tag team was Billy Red Lions and Red Bastien. Red said he loved working with Billy better than any other partner he had. And when you look at Red's tag team resume, he was with a who's who of wrestlers over the decades, and he picks out Billy. And Dick Beyer said they were the best babyface team I ever saw. And in the AWA, their battles for the tag team championship drew record numbers. And in my opinion, that was Red's best tag team partner.
What do you got for your next one, Mick?
I have a couple of cowboys, or at least the drugstore cowboys, Blackjack Lanza and Bobby Duncan. And, you know, we said an awful lot about Jack Lanza, one of the toughest guys legitimately to ever get into a ring. I love watching Jack Lanza's matches. You know, it's just with that one flap of hair, you know, going off into the breeze, and, you know, the shoe polish that he would leave on a guy's rib cage from coloring his hair before he came out to the ring. The guy that I think in this equation that was underrated is Bobby Duncan. Bobby did not say a lot in the interviews. He had that thick Texas drawl, but he was a tremendous worker for a big man. And one of my favorite tag teams of all time. I just think in the scheme of things, you hear a lot about Blackjack Lanza. Of course, he went on a team with Blackjack Mulligan. Mm-hmm. So Bobby Duncan kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. But in the annals of AWA tag team history, they're right up there.
Yeah. George, I know your next one is one that maybe Mick, he said earlier, he wasn't necessarily a fan of. It just didn't do it for him.
Well, that's Luscious Jimmy, or Luscious Johnny and Handsome Jimmy Valiant. And they came into the AWA, and I would lose count on the fingers and toes I have the number of times people have said to me that they should have been AWA tag team champions. They were a good team. They worked together well. Their interviews were entertaining. They had a different type of style in the ring that, you know, sometimes you could laugh at it, but other times you took it seriously. But here's the deal with them. They, again, were in a tag team shuffle at the time they were in the AWA with about 5 or 6 or 7 other top tag teams, along with Lanza and Duncan that Mick just talked about being the champions. So how could you make Jimmy and Johnny the champions? But here's the secret behind the scenes. Verne was not going to put the title on those two guys, and here's why. They had been champions in the WWF. They had been champions in the WWA. And Verne was not going to give them the title because that would make it seem like he was copying them, and he didn't want them. So if he had them in a match, he actually wanted someone else to go over them to kind of give that rub to the WWF that they're not as good as you perceive them to be. That's a behind the scenes thing. But Johnny and Jimmy, they were a good team. They would have been good champions. And again, you could have thrown Bobby Heenan in, and you want to talk about behind the scenes scuffle. Bobby didn't necessarily like being associated with either one of them. At least that's the story I got.
Wow. And it kind of makes sense when you're talking about Verne not wanting to put the belts on him, you know, to kind of, you know, not look like they're copying, because in today's day and age, it's like if somebody wins a belt somewhere, all of a sudden they win a belt everywhere else. And all of a sudden you've got like this multiple promotion champion. So I think that's an interesting way to look at it, George.
It's kind of like Verne Gagne and Ivan Koloff when Koloff came in. They always acknowledged that Koloff beat Bruno. He was the man. But Verne, by beating Koloff, in his own way, proved that he was better than Bruno, at least the perception he wanted to give out. That's the way wrestling worked. Made sense.
Yeah. All right, we're about 30 minutes through our 60-minute Broadway here, guys. So what you got next up, Mick?
The High Flyers, Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell. And Greg Gagne is the one with the detractors over the years. Well, but I would challenge anybody to go back and look at those AWA video clips from the 1980s when Gagne and Brunzell were feuding with guys like Lanza and Duncombe or Ventura and Adonis or what have you, the Sheiks. They were so damn over with the crowds. It was beyond belief. I mean, you could denigrate Greg for his size. They were tremendous as a team. Greg Gagne himself was a great worker, and they blew the roof off of every arena. They sold out the St. Paul Civic Center time and time again. The chemistry was there. The magic was there. And I would say that as a babyface tag team, I don't know of too many teams in any promotion. And I'm talking about whether it's the Rock and Roll Express or what have you. The High Flyers were as over and as popular and as accomplished as any tag team in wrestling. And we were lucky to see them here in the AWA.
What you got for your next one, George?
Interesting that as Mick is talking about the High Flyers, my phone was buzzing here. Greg just left me a message. Greg was good on the team, though. Absolutely phenomenal tag team.
You think he knew that you were talking about him? Is that like when your ears are burning?
No. I get regular calls from him, so he left a message. Okay. My next team is, I think you got to go back to the beginning if we're talking AWA and the end of the NWA territory in Minneapolis, and that has to be the team that had one of the neatest names at the time, Murder Incorporated. Does it say anything better than that? Tiny Mills, Crusher Kowalski with a K. And Verne made them his very first tag team champions after they came off of a tour that you see a picture of here. They were champions in Hawaii. They were international tag team champions. And then they came into Minneapolis recognized as NWA champions. Then when the AWA took over in 1960, Verne went with the flow and he put the belts on Tiny and Stan. And together they were magic in the ring. And again, they had that same look, that same ring style, and phenomenal tag team. And then as happens with some tag teams that adds to their legacy is they had a falling out and they broke up. And we had great matches between the two of them along with other partners as well. But that's the legacy of Tiny and Stan. And in my book, we can't talk tag teams unless we talk the beginning. And Tiny Mills, Stan Kowalski were that.
Your next one here, Mick, really interests me, and kind of give me a little bit of a backstory on the picture that we're about to see too.
Okay, well let's bring the photograph up. This is a tag team that was very unique in that they were both big, rough, tough guys, and I'm talking about Jerry Blackwell and Ken Patera. They were the real deal. And when I say tough guys, I mean no nonsense, no bullshit. If these guys wanted to, they would rip your heads off. And of course, they were managed by Sheik Adnan LKC. Now, here's what I don't quite get. Sheik referred to Jerry Blackwell, of course, as Sheik Ayatollah Blackwell. All right, makes sense. But he called Ken Patera Lawrence of Arabia. And I'm not quite sure. I've never understood where the Lawrence of Arabia came in. I understand Ayatollah Blackwell. I understand that part of it. But this was a legit team. And again, you talk about a team that had heat. Oh, my God. Adnan El-Casey was probably one of the most over heels in wrestling. And with Blackwell and Patera, he had magic there. They had phenomenal matches with the High Flyers. And you can't talk about tag team wrestling in the 80s without mentioning Blackwell and Patera.
And, you got to add this about Patera. What really made it great was he was a turncoat. He turned on America. He was an Olympic champion. And he turns on America and goes with Iraq. Does it get any – how can you not hate this guy?
And that's a story. That's a wrestling story that is as old as time.
Exactly. Sergeant Slaughter. There,
Oh, back in 91. Oh, man. Yeah. To go for it. Yeah. I mean, and that picture, I saw that picture and I can only imagine, like, you have those two, Americans, and you're turning and you're teaming with the Sheik, and you've got everything. It's like, to me, that just screams heat.
Chris, you got to understand something. These guys, Adnan was promising them everything: oil wells and harem and women and dancing women and back rubs, from the massage for Jerry Blackwell's 5-acre back. So they had everything. The entourage was waiting at the airport in Baghdad for them to come back with the tag team titles. So it was just a storyline that was just fantastic.
And when you talk about the difference in the two styles, both were big, rough, tough guys, like Mick says, but Patera was the weightlifter, the nice build, the worker, and then you had Jerry Blackwell, who was the epitome of an out-of-shape person who you don't believe should be in the ring, but he was so good and so believable. And you put them together, opposite styles, and yes, the best.
What do you got for your next one here, George?
I'm going back a little bit to the Mills and Kowalski era, and coming up with Hard-Boiled Haggerty and Gene Kiniski. And the reason I picked that team was that these were two guys that came together sort of by accident in the AWA, because Lenny Montana, HB's regular partner, had a broken leg, and he needed to come up with a partner. He picked Gene Kiniski. They went on to win the title. And then, as sometimes happens, they battled each other because of jealousy, and the team broke up. And HB beat Kiniski in a loser leave town match. That's phenomenal when you think that Gene went on to be NWA world champion. But then the other unique thing is when I do results, I see how these guys' two careers were connected so much during the course of their individual careers, and how they had teamed together before here. And even after they had their horrid feud in the AWA, a year later, they were Canadian tag team champions together. So a phenomenal tag team of some similar styles, and in my opinion, one of the best for the year or so that they were together in the AWA.
All right, what do you got for your next one, Mick?
I'm going to bring Ray Stevens back, first of all, and of course, his tag team partner, Pat Patterson. Ray and Pat had already established themselves as a tremendous tag team, particularly out on the West Coast. Again, this wasn't a situation where Verne said, let's put these two guys together and see what happens. Their reputation preceded them. And again, talk about a team that had heat. Their promos on television were fantastic. And again, the 1970s, this tells you the 1970s AWA tag team scene was just phenomenal. When you look at the list of guys that were competing in and around the territory, and you can't ignore Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson, not only in the AWA, but in the annals of wrestling history in general, one of the greatest tag teams of all time.
What do you got coming up for your next one here, George?
I'm going to go with probably one of our most notorious tag teams, and that is Mad Dog and his little brother, as he referred to him, Paul the Butcher Vachon. Verne hit the gold mine when he put those two together. They had been a team off and on through the years. Here you see him jumping on the stomach of Pepper Gomez. And the Vachons in the ring were probably the reason that teams like Red Bastien and Billy Red Lions and so many others didn't get the championship, because Verne drew so well with his heel champions in the Vachons. Mad Dog was over, of course, as the greatest heel in probably AWA history, having the long feud with Verne. But together with Butcher, they hold the record for having the longest reign uninterrupted as tag team champions. And the only reason they left or got rid of the title was in 71, Butcher wanted to go and start promoting and taking over Montreal, and Mad Dog was going to go with him. And so they asked Verne to take the title off of him. But together, their battles with the Redheads and other tag teams, phenomenal and money-making. May have been one of Verne's, along with Hennig and Race and Nick and Ray, probably one of his best money-making teams.
And your next one here, Mick, is I think one that everybody's going to recognize right off the bat.
Well, first of all, I want to just make mention about something George said. In terms of the money making again, the AWA just brilliant tag team strategists over the years. The feuds that they created, and George had mentioned the longest running tag team champions.
Yeah.
That was back in the day when a championship was based on years, not days.
Mm-hmm.
As you have today, like 307 days as champion. The tag team I'm going to talk about, Mad Dog is coming back for another fall. We just heard George talking about him and the Butcher, Mad Dog Vachon and Baron von Raschke. And it was actually the dog who came up with the Baron character for mild-mannered Jim Raschke from Nebraska. And when you put these two together, they were one of the great heel tag teams in AWA history. Vicious to a fault, underhanded, cutthroat, dirty, you name it. They were the ultimate tag team combination. And what's interesting about that, again, typically towards the end of their career, they both became beloved baby faces in the AWA. We're going to take it. There they are right there. Boy, talk about a couple of just phenomenal veterans in the business. And a quick aside, George will remember this. When I did my Saturday night at Ringside anniversary special, I'm interviewing Mad Dog Vachon and Baron von Raschke. This was after Mad Dog had been, unfortunately, the victim of a hit and run and had a leg amputated. And Baron von Raschke did a walk-on, and he invited Mad Dog to join him after the show in a three-legged race. Only Baron von Raschke could get away with asking the dog to join him in a three-legged race, but legendary, individually and tag team. Love that combination.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that very interview segment that Mick talks about, Mad Dog ended his interview with that walk-on. He ended the interview by saying, "It's a dog-eat-dog world." And the Baron came up and said, "That's all the people need to know."
Perfect.
Love it.
And that was unplanned. I mean, I don't think they planned that out, but it was perfect.
But what do you got for your next one, George?
My next team is one that a lot of fans probably won't even remember, but I think they had a short run and they could have been used better. And that was the Super Destroyers, Mark I, Mark II. Mark II and Mark III, Shire, get it right. Mark II and Mark III. Bob Remus and Neil Gway under the masks. And this was a team managed by Lord Alfred Hayes. They got phenomenal heat. They were able to have feuds with Mad Dog and a variety of tag team partners and the High Flyers and Verne Gagne. And the unique part about it is that at the end of their run together, they broke up in a very unusual way. They had Mark II go and sign with Bobby Heenan, and Mark III stayed with Hayes. And then all of a sudden, the Hayes-Heenan feud was on again, and it was great. I mean, great promoting, and two guys that really were good together. Neil Gway is less known. We know Bob Remus and Sergeant Slaughter, but that was one of the greatest teams in AWA 80s, 70s tag teams for me.
I just want to piggyback on that real quick, Chris. The funny thing about Super Destroyer Mark III, Neil Gway, there would be times when he would be wrestling at the Minneapolis Auditorium or the St. Paul Civic Center without his mask. This is after a while he had been unmasked already. He would get into the ring, wrestle 15, 20 minutes without the mask, and then later on in the evening, he would do a run-in and he put the mask back on. So I'm not sure if he figured that wrestling fans didn't recognize, is this the same guy? Didn't remember that they saw him 10 minutes earlier.
Did fans know? Could fans pick it up right away?
Of course they did. It was just, for some reason, it was like his Linus and his security blanket. He put the mask back on and came running back to the ring. So funny stuff about him. But I know I'm on to my number 8 right now. This is when the business changed. And you talk about legendary tag teams. If you talk about it in the history of the AWA, whether you're old school or not, you have to acknowledge Animal and Hawk, the Road Warriors, one of the if not the greatest tag team, one of the most legendary tag teams in the AWA. And I would put Paul Ellering in there as a key ingredient in that combination. He was a real life business manager for the Road Warriors. There's no question about the fact, the roadies, both from here, of course, they claimed they were, born and raised in the streets of Chicago. But this is when professional wrestling was changing and in a big, big way. And the Road Warriors were allegedly heels when they first came into the AWA area, beat the Crusher and Baron von Raschke for the tag team championships. But by the time they lost the titles to gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Steve Regal, which incidentally, I think is a stroke of genius on Verne Gagne's part, the Road Warriors had gone babyface. So no matter what territory, NWA, WWF, AWA, the Road Warriors, for better or for worse, one of the greatest tag teams in history.
It's interesting because you always go back and you hear the Road Warrior pop. And that's really the first thing, because we talk about the reaction and the pop and everything now, but the first time that I heard it was the Road Warrior pop. And I think that's really where that term came from when they turned babyface. I got one question that I want to ask you guys as it pertains to the Road Warriors. Speculation is that they refuse to lose. Was there any truth to the rumor that either one of you know that they refuse to put anybody over?
I would say that's not true because they put over Jimmy Garvin and Steve Regal. Of all tag teams to be put over. I guess the one thing that I heard a lot, not necessarily that they wouldn't put people over, although I think their one-loss record probably indicates they had a lot of, power there. They wouldn't sell a lot. And a team like, Larry Hennig and Kurt, for example, or the Crusher and the Bruiser later on in their careers, the Road Warriors, for better or for worse, again, did not sell. And you're in the ring with a guy like Larry Hennig, and Larry gave Animal and Hawk a couple of receipts more often than not when they wouldn't sell. But I think it was more so that, and again, you're creating this persona that these guys are unbeatable. So in that sense, you understand why they're not selling.
Right, part of the gimmick, part of the presentation.
What's interesting about it is we've talked during these tag team stories now about teams that get together and they do it for the sake of the business, whether they get along outside the ring and all that stuff we talked about. Mick touched on it with Crusher and Bruiser. I think we'd have to say that Crusher and Bruiser deserved to have the recognition that they do in history. But with Animal and Hawk, they deliberately would not put Crusher and Bruiser over. And they were specifically asked by them at their age to not, throw them to the mat. And the Road Warriors ignored it. So that bothers me. But their legacy, the Road Warriors, like you say, you can't mention tag team wrestling, and they ushered in a whole new era of tag team wrestling. So there's and that genius move with Garvin and Regal, like Mick says. Great tag team.
I know we got about 10 minutes left here, guys, and I'll let you guys. You've each got a couple left. So what do you got for your number 9, George?
I'm going to go with another mask duo, and this was great because Dr. X, Dick Beyer, had been here for 3 years, and he had given his notice to Verne Gagne that he wanted to leave and he would agree to unmask down the road in 1970. So we have a wrestler who comes into the territory by the name of Jim Osborne. And Jim Osborne, for the most part, was a journeyman wrestler who had been around. He had done a lot of things, but never really hit the big time. Dick Beyer went to Verne Gagne and he said, here's what I want to do. Give me Jim Osborne. And he put the mask on him and called him Double X. Now, you had to see these two guys standing next to each other and in the ring. Osborne was almost a carbon copy of Dick Beyer in build, in stature, and look. And he was Double X. And the short run they had here, wrestling against Verne and Paul Diamond and other tag teams, Bastien and Gomez, etc. They had a good run. And the being able to switch off, and the fans knew it. The referee, of course, he was again out maybe buying a bag of popcorn and missed it. But that was the irritation factor, and switching places in the ring. And so they were a great tag team, a great gimmick. The sad part was it was at the end of Dr. X's original run, and it was short-lived. But I can't help but say they were a great tag team.
What do you got for your next one, Mick?
This one doesn't need a lot of belaboring. The Crusher and Dick the Bruiser. Legendary tag team combination, not only in the AWA, but literally everywhere they went. They were not cousins, but they were billed that way. When they first came into the AWA territory specifically, they were a vicious heel tag team. Of course, by the time they finished their careers, as did so many heels, they were beloved as a team here in the AWA area. Both individually great wrestlers, world renowned. In the AWA, Crusher was the more popular of the two because he was the mainstay. He was here all the time. Bruiser would kind of come in and out at the beckoning of the Crusher. But legendary. And you can't talk about AWA tag teams without Crusher and Bruiser. They're right up there.
Yeah, and for those that haven't listened, we actually did an episode on Crusher and Bruiser early on. It was maybe like our fourth or fifth one. Go back and check it out. It was a great conversation about that. All right, George, what do you got for your last one here?
My last one is exactly what we've talked about through this whole episode. Two guys that on the surface in the ring for decades hated each other, wrestled each other, feuded with each other, tried to end each other's careers. And at the end here in 1978, Verne needs a partner that can fight dirty like Stevens and Patterson after his own partner, Billy Robinson, is injured. That's the storyline. And he goes out and he seeks out that partner that can out dirty Stevens and Patterson. And he comes up with, surprise, Mad Dog Vachon. And the mystery is the fans are immediately saying, oh my God, Verne can't trust the dog. They hate each other. Can they coexist? Can they get along? Well, not only did they get along, they won the AWA Tag Team Championship and held it for a year against Stevens and Patterson and Jesse and Adrian and some other teams. And that is phenomenal promoting. That when we're done, we go your way, I'll go my way, that sort of thing. But two enemies bearing the hatchet because of the hatred of each team they wrestled.
Last but not least, Buddy Rose and Doug Summers. I cannot talk about the AWA tag team scene and the history of the AWA without giving these guys credit that I don't think they necessarily get in the long haul. You had two veteran wrestlers. By the time they came into the AWA, both had been in the business for 15, 20 years, whatever, along with Sherry Martel, one of the shining lights in the AWA towards the end of the successful years for the AWA. Buddy Rose, of course, trained by Verne Gagne. Doug Summers got his start here in the AWA area. And as Buddy would always remind everybody, he never lost a fall in any of their tag team matches. It was always Doug Summers who got beat. But their matches with the Midnight Rockers were absolutely off the charts. And in the history of the AWA, some of the greatest bloodbaths of all time. So Rose and Summers, absolutely. Don't ignore them. Great tag team.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Let's go ahead and get into, well, first of all, Mick, I know that, why don't you pay tribute to somebody, the passing of referee Charlie Smith?
Yeah, George knows Charlie very, very well. Wrestling fans around the country knew him. He was a mainstay at Cauliflower Alley. Not an AWA connection, but a tremendous referee, a long career. What a great goodwill ambassador for the business. You go to those CAC conventions, he greeted everybody with a smile and a handshake and a laugh. Very, very sad. He is going to be sorely, sorely missed. Just a wonderful human being.
I say amen to all of that. Just a great human being.
And in our last couple of minutes here, guys, Mick, let's go ahead and do a trivia. We'll do the shout out, and then and we'll take it home.
Trivia. Along the lines of the tag team combinations, here's your trivia question. The Crusher and Verne Gagne back in the 1960s chose Kenny J as a tag team partner in a 6-man tag team match in Minneapolis. My question is kind of two parts. What tag team did they face? What tag team did Crusher, Verne, and Kenny J face? And the match concluded with Kenny J pinning one of the opposition in a major upset. Two-part question. Give me the answers. You're going to win some merchandise.
And you can hit him up on his Facebook page. You can email him at mickkarch@gmail.com. They can also email you as well, right, George?
Correct.
All right, at gshire
at comcast.net.
Comcast.net. All right, and one more thing to take care of, guys. Let's go ahead and give our shout-outs.
Go ahead, Georgie.
I'm going to go with my buddy, Dr. Jim Allen. Sweetheart of a guy. I love talking with him. We have lunch at least once a year, and he is so hilarious. He remembers the old stuff. He loves the behind-the-scenes stories that I share with him. He throws out a name. He loves our podcast. He's turned his son-in-law on to the podcast as well. So, Dr. Jim, I love you, and I'm looking forward to our next lunch. Thanks for being a follower of AWA Unleashed.
All right, what do you got, Mick?
My shout-out goes to a dear friend of almost 30 years, Karen Swanson. Karen is a longtime wrestling fan. She hobnobbed with the Road Warriors and Wayne Bloom and Mike Enos and a lot of guys when she was working with Zubas back in the day. Loves our podcasts. She'll do anything for to further our efforts. So thank you and shout out to Karen.
And I'm going to go with Justin Clapper at JC Pro Wrestle on Twitter. Big supporter of the program. And thank you guys for all the support. Want to thank Soda Stick right there. You can see up in the right-hand corner. There it is, George. Thank them for the AWA Unleashed merchandise. We got more things coming down the pike. Check out their website, sodastickco.com. Use promo code Unleashed for 15% off. Also, Lift Bridge Brewery. That's where we're going to be having our very first live show coming up. You can see right there, Saturday, June 11th. Doors open at noon, live podcast at 2. We're going to have some giveaways, shenanigans. We're going to have a whole bunch of fun. And then also Lift Bridge Brewery, you can tell I've been partaking in it. And check them out, liftbridgebrewery.com. They've got great booze. They got pop. They got a lot of really cool things. Hey, by the way, when it relates to tag teams, I did not catch the heyday of the AWA. So next week, I given you guys a little bit of a homework assignment here. I want you guys to come up with a few tag teams, maybe post 88 to the end, that you feel maybe were the best of that era, because that's my child. And that's what, some of us that didn't get to see the, Cruiser or Bruiser, Crusher, Verne, Mad Dog, things like that. We didn't get a chance to see that. So maybe in those days, whether it's Bad Company, the Hangman, the Destruction Crew, things like that. So just got a few that I wanted to get to, but I want to kind of get into it a little bit more next week. I think that's it. And good stuff, guys. Appreciate it, and appreciate everybody out there for listening. Any final words, guys?
Keep it old school. Keep it AWA.
And always thanks to Chris. We love you, man. You keep this boat rowing, and we need you, and we appreciate you.
Aww.